Welcome, Pod.
Welcome back in, everybody, to the Chris Mathis podcast. Of course, Chris Mathis here alongside, across the way through the teletype machine with Spencer Mathis at L Savage Spence on Twitter. Follow me at the Chris Mathis on Twitter as well. Obviously, with it being Monday, yesterday we got some unfortunate news regarding the voice of the Tampa Bay Rays. Breaking news came about yesterday. Early afternoon, the Tampa Bay Rays are deeply saddened to announce the passing of Dave Wills, who served as the team's radio announcer for the past 18 years. Wills passed away on Sunday, March 5th, 2023 at the age of 58. This is all via Rays Communications published that they put out here yesterday. During his time with the Rays, Wills became a beloved figure among Rays fans for his passion, enthusiasm, and expertise. He called some of the most memorable moments in Rays history, including the team's run to the World Series in both 2008 and 2020. Wills was also known for his impeccable play-by-play calling, his insightful analysis, and his infectious personality. His contributions to the Rays organization and the Tampa Bay community will never be forgotten. Dave was an outstanding broadcaster, a great friend, and an even better person, said Rays principal owner Stuart Sternberg. He had a remarkable talent for bringing the game to life for our fans and was a vital part of the Rays family. We will miss him dearly, and our thoughts and prayers are with his family and loved ones during this difficult time. The Rays will honor Dave Wills with a special pregame tribute this season, and details will be announced at a later date. Again, just 58 years old, Dave Wills, the voice of the Tampa Bay Rays, of course, alongside his partner and Andy Fried, phenomenal guys there. We grew up listening to Dave Wills, Andy Fried, Spence for years and years with Dad in the car and loved Rays baseball games, and they made it more fun. They made a Rays baseball game more fun than going to a game, in my opinion. If you listen to their call, just the camaraderie that they had, the discussions that they had, not only about baseball, but about movies. They were funny throughout broadcast, and then they pick back up right where they left off as if they've never skipped a beat or went off on some side story talking about the Elvis movie that came out last year or the year before. But either way, Dave Wills passing away at the age of 58. Spence, I know you were a huge fan of his and try to incorporate some of his call style into your broadcast at Young Harris College. But Dave Wills, talk about your thoughts when you saw the news via social media about the passing of the voice of the Tampa Bay Rays, 58 years old, Dave Wills.
Yeah, it's no coincidence that his first or second season was 2008 whenever the Rays made their first World Series run, where they lost to the Phillies in the World Series, of course, but an incredible season. We also heard him all throughout 2020 whenever the Rays made the World Series in the COVID year, ended up losing that one as well. But Wills made every game fun. Even whenever the Rays, we knew that they were going to make the wild card because they're always a team that's going to win a ton of games. But even whenever they were just making the wild card and losing, it always felt like there's a little bit of enthusiasm, a little bit of hope, at least given by Dave Wills. And, of course, his sidekick, Andy Fried, who does an incredible job as well still. And it's sad to see Dave Wills go. I mean, his iconic strike three calls is always great. The Rays win, Rays win, Rays win will always be remembered by everybody who's a Rays fan. So he's an iconic sports announcer, probably my favorite. I mean, the top three in Tampa are unbeatable. Like, you've got Gene Deckerhoff, Dave Wills, and, of course, the Lightning announcer, blanking out on his name right now, but he's also incredible. So they were all great. And Dave Wills, I mean, he was up there as well. I mean, a great MLB announcer. And I took some of the stuff from his game into my broadcast, which I haven't got the chance to do that much this year for baseball because the season just started, but I'm going to keep that going on. Any opportunity I get to do play-by-play, I'm going to try and be a little bit more enthusiastic like he was with each and every call, because just like you mentioned, his camaraderie with his partner was just always so good. They would always talk about stuff. You would know that they would continue to talk about stuff, and he was so good at leading conversations. And he's probably one of my favorite He is one of my favorite broadcasters of all time, and I got to go with those top three in Tampa, then Tommy Jenkins, because he reminds me a lot of Tommy Jenkins in the way that he can just start a conversation with anybody and just continue to lead that conversation. As long as the guy's talking back, that you're never going to have very much dead air time whenever you're with a guy like that. And I strive to be like those too. And to see Dave Wills go at the age of 58 is super sad, but I mean, he's an absolute legend in Tampa Bay, and he's a legend around the major leagues. Whenever you got to see the Rays win a big playoff game or a World Series game, he was the one on the call that you would see on SportsCenter the next day in 2008, 2020, of course. So I think that he was one of the greatest announcers that we're ever going to see, at least in baseball. It's going to be very difficult to try and replicate what he did, because he was just so good at being the play-by-play for the Rays for over 15 years, around 15 years, and into this year's spring training. Yeah.
18 years, yeah. And you were talking about Dave Mishkin, the voice of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Tommy Jenkins, of course, the legendary voice at Young Harris College. Whenever you're not on the mic or he's doing play-by-play, you're doing public address announcements. But we spoke with Tommy Jenkins on the podcast a little bit over a year ago. I got the memory last week at some point that it had been a year since Tommy Jenkins was on the podcast, which is ridiculous that time has flown by so quickly. But again, Dave Wills, a great one. A great broadcaster, as we've talked about, but an even better man. And if you tune into a broadcast, you would know that. If you followed him on Twitter, you would see that in all of his tweets at random listeners that were shouting him out and thanking him for his amazing calls or thanking him for the shout outs on the air. And he was always replying to people and always letting them know that he appreciated them for listening to his broadcast and his calls. And a little bit over 2.5 weeks ago, iHeartMedia Tampa Bay moved buildings from Gandy Boulevard to Clearwater at Feather Sound, and that's where I'm currently at right now for the recording of this podcast, the iHeartRadio studio at Clearwater Feather Sound. And just before, now I'm a little bit upset with myself. I think it was fun in the moment, and I know that Dave loved the moment too. But looking at what would just happen 2.5, 3 weeks later. There was a bobblehead in the studio. Now, keep in mind, the iHeartRadio studio for DAE, the sports station that I work for at iHeartRadio Tampa Bay, was destroyed. Like, when we moved, guys went in, they took bats. They took Granddaddy Carl's bat that we had, the little mini wooden bat that I left in the studio, and they took it and yeah, Mama, you heard that right, Granddaddy Carl. They took it and smashed the desktops, the keyboards, everything. Everything was everywhere. And so I went back and I saw the aftermath of it, and I saw a bobblehead of Dave Wills, Andy Fried, the voice of the Tampa Bay Rays, and I saw Pat and Aaron put their pictures on the cover of it, like over Dave and Andy's face. And I thought, you know what, it'd be pretty funny. They left it here for a reason. Let me take this bat and, take a swing at it and crush the bobblehead, and I did. And there's a video on social media at the Chris Mathis. I put it up on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as well. It was cool. There was no hard feelings. It was just, hey, let me take part in this. And then I posted it and it caught some traction. Sometimes I forget that, I work for iHeartMedia, and it caught a lot of traction. And, a lot of Rays fans saw it. Some Rays fans were upset with me. Other fans were upset with me because I crushed a bobblehead of Dave and Andy. Some fans were saying, hey, that's iHeart history right there, and you destroyed it. I would have taken it for free. And I felt bad because, I didn't think like that. I was just thinking, hey, selfishly, this would be cool and it'd make for a good video, and it was a good farewell. Well, then 2 or 3 days later, the Rays had their fan fest at Tropicana Field. And of course, WDAE and the Ronnie and T Crash show, all the shows, Jane Z show, Pat and Aaron show, we all went to Tropicana Field to do live broadcast for Fan Fest and, talk with players, coaches, and of course, the voices of the Rays, Dave Wills, Andy Fried too. And I'm sitting there, and Dave Wills comes up to me, and he's like, Chris Mathis. And I'm like, hey, what's up, Dave? He's like, my wife has a bone to pick with you, buddy. And I'm like, what's that? And he's like, yeah, she saw the video of you, taking a baseball bat to my bobblehead, and she didn't take liking to that. And I said, I didn't mean anything bad by it. And he was smiling. I think that I couldn't tell if he was joking about her, but I know that he was okay. He was fine, smiling about it. And he said, but we're going to have to talk about this on the air. So then he joins Ronnie and T-Kraz, and he's like, yeah, so, I see this video. I'm scrolling through Twitter, and I see this video of somebody taking a baseball bat to my bobblehead and just crushing it. And Ronnie and T-Kraz had no idea that I'd done that. So they look, they're like, who are you talking about, Dave? And Dave's thinking, I'm talking about your producer right here. And Ronnie and T-Kraz were like, oh, they didn't really know I did that. And I'm like, yeah, I did it out of fun. It wasn't anything hard, no hard feelings. And then Dave's like, hang on, I got something. So he reaches into his backpack, and I'm like, oh, what's he got for me? And Dave pulls out a brand new bobblehead from that 2008. No, it was 10 years ago, 2013 season. It was a bobblehead, a replica of the 10 years of them being the voices of the Rays. And so he gave me that brand new one in a box that I had just destroyed, a few days prior. And he's like, take good care of this one, take good care of this one. And I mean, after the interview was over, I told Chris Mueller of the Tampa Bay Rays communication team, I said, hey, I need to talk with Dave after he leaves with his interview. Make sure he doesn't go too far if you can. He's like, oh yeah, he'll stay for you. And I said, okay, cool. So after we go to the commercial break, Dave's chilling over there in the corner, and I go up to him, I give him a handshake, and I was like, hey, look, I really didn't mean anything by that. He's like, oh, I know, Chris. We thought it was kind of cool anyway. I said, okay, cool. I was like, well, tell your wife, I apologize if I did hurt her feelings or anything like that. And he's like, okay, I'll tell her. And then that's when I recorded a video of Dave and I talking about, the bobblehead and his wife's birthday. That was the very next day, that Sunday. And, just on Saturday, this Saturday that just passed, he called a Rays game with Andy Fried. Everything was normal. Went to bed last night. And then today the news comes out, or Sunday, the news comes out that he passes away. So, ultimately, just thoughts and prayers go up to his family, his friends, because I know he had a loving family, just like he was a loving guy. And I know that not only will his highlights and his personality be remembered forever in the Tampa Bay area, but I think across the Major League Baseball world of baseball, because he was such a good broadcaster. Him and Andy Fried, hands down, one of the best duos and all of the MLB. I think if anybody sat down and listened to all of the team's broadcasters, they would agree with that. But again, just a somber time here in Tampa, obviously a somber time for Tampa Bay Rays fans, baseball fans all over the state of Florida, all over the country, all over the world, because there are Rays fans everywhere. Spencer's in Georgia, obviously, as he just referenced, he was upset about the news of the passing of the great Dave Wills. But without that, moving on from that story, we got to get into something more positive, aside from the fact that his legacy will live on forever in this area and around baseball and around radio as a whole. We got a lot to get into.
Yeah, and T's and P's to Dave Wills and everyone that knew him in any way. Of course, the Rays fans, but everyone in his family, everyone that loved him around Tampa Bay. I heard he was a very personable person. And the thing with you destroying the bobblehead, I think that gave you at least a chance to kind of like actually meet him in person and talk to him.
That's true, yeah.
For real, right before he, of course, passed away yesterday afternoon. But I mean, I think that was just a good opportunity for you to get to know him right before it happened. And I mean, you got a really cool bobblehead that you can now have for the rest of your life, as long as you want to keep it. And I think that's a cool thing that you got to really talk to him actually, like not just working for him before he passed away.
Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, that's a great point. He came up to me, and as a kid that grew up a Rays fan and grew up listening to him, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm Chris. What's up, man? And he knew me before because I would, run Rays games at DAE, but he wouldn't see me. Well, this time he got to see me and he knew my voice. And so it gave me an opportunity to finally meet him face to face and actually, have a real deal conversation with him. And he was just a very nice guy, very humble guy. And again, made you feel like, he was like you were part of the family almost. And that's what he did with his broadcast too. That's what made him so great, is he made you feel as if you were in the press box or in the box with him and Andy Fried. All right, well, this edition of the Chris Mathis podcast, of course, with Spencer Mathis on the other side, is brought to you by Information on Demand. Whether you need criminal background checks, drug screenings, E-Verify, academic accreditations, or other screening services, they've got you covered. Again, that is Information on Demand. My friends over there will take care of you. You can rest easy knowing a highly trained search team will get you that information in just 8 hours or less, just one great night of sleep, and you'll get all of that information that you need. Again, they're fast, they're accurate, they're reliable, they are affordable. That is Information on Demand. Visit them online, informationondemand.net, or better yet, call them at 855-914-4636, 855-914-4636. Again, Information on Demand brings you another edition of the Chris Mathis podcast, as you can see down below in the description or on the screen right now. But NFL Combine happened, Spence, this weekend, and will continue to happen. We saw some of the biggest quarterbacks heading into the NFL draft get spoken about. A lot of hype around these quarterbacks. When I think of the quarterbacks in this year's group, Will Levis, Stetson Bennett, because he could be a sleeper. I don't know if he's going to be drafted high. I don't think that. I'm just saying he could be a sleeper pickup. C.J. Stroud, of course, Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, and Hendon Hooker, too. So there are some big names. Now, as far as if they're NFL caliber ready or anything of that nature, that'll be told here in the next coming months and even the coming weeks as well. But when you think of this quarterback class as a whole, Spence, what do you think about this quarterback class heading into the NFL draft as they get ready to fulfill their dreams in the NFL?
I mean, there's obviously two big names there with C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. Of course, Bryce Young is getting the treatment by the media in which he's undersized now. It's going to be difficult for him to play in the NFL, which is very valid. So I think right now the top runner right now heading into the draft is C.J. Stroud, the Ohio State quarterback. a very good quarterback. He wowed everybody at the combine, put up really good numbers, of course, at the combine. But those were really the top two heading in. And once they saw that Bryce Young was 5'10" and 1/8 in height and just over 200 pounds barely, the NFL media knew that they had to hype up some other players, because Will Levis, horrible last season with his team.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson, horrible. But the thing with Will Levis is he reminds me exactly of Zach Murray. So isn't Zach? Wait, who am I thinking of?
Aaron Murray.
No, he reminds me of Zach. He reminds me of Zach Wilson last season, or 2 years ago now. It's been where Zach Wilson's been an absolute bust. But for the last 2 years, we've just seen quarterbacks that wow at the combine, like Will Levis. We knew he was going to wow because he has a great arm coming in, but he just doesn't have the size for a team that needs a quarterback to take a big leap at him. And that's the thing that a lot of teams are doing now, is that if you don't need a quarterback, like if you're not a quarterback away, you're not going to draft a quarterback like you used to, because you've got to build everywhere around that, because you've seen that free agent quarterbacks are the way to go. If you want to win a Super Bowl, these rookie quarterbacks coming in, the last time I saw a quarterback in his first 4 years win a Super Bowl was Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, that was the last one. You're right.
Patrick
and I think
Mahomes,
Russell Wilson too.
So, I mean, it just does not happen. And we even see Josh Allen. I mean, we saw him. He's a lot like Anthony Richardson was. He was a little bit better in college, of course, but same size, same numbers, just the same type of player, both boneheaded at least heading into their NFL careers, especially Anthony Richardson. I mean, the only game that I saw of Anthony Richardson was against Will Levis, and he ended that game with, I think he was like 18 for 40 something, like just not even completing half of his passes. He threw for a touchdown and 2 interceptions, and that was really all that I saw out of him. And all I saw the entire season for Anthony Richardson was the Florida Gator fans asking him to be benched, which didn't happen, but we continued to see him play and play and play. He didn't look any better as the year went on. Everyone knows he's not NFL ready. He's a project that I think a team that has a quarterback now but needs to get ready for the future. I think that's the only team that I could see drafting Anthony Richardson and it working out in any capacity, like the Buffalo Bills did whenever they had Tyrod Taylor. They were a playoff team the year before with Tyrod Taylor. They won their first playoff game in years with Tyrod Taylor. And then they drafted Josh Allen because they know that they needed to get a little bit younger at that position, because Tyrod Taylor was a little bit older. He's not going to win you the big game. So they went with Josh Allen. Of course, Josh Allen has gotten them in the playoffs pretty far, but hasn't won them the big games yet. I think that'll come eventually, but the AFC is just so difficult. But a team like the Bills were, and I think it was 2017 or 2018 now, in which Josh Allen was drafted. It's got to be a team like that. And the only team that I see whenever I'm glancing over the NFL with a good head coach that knows how to run an offense is the Rams. Stafford is at the end of his career. We saw him hurt all year last season. You look back at his Super Bowl numbers and you're not even impressed one bit. I mean, he led the NFL in interceptions in his Super Bowl year. I mean, I just don't see that much out of Matthew Stafford moving forward. You don't really see that much whenever you go back and look either. I mean, he was hyped up in Detroit. He finally got to the Rams. He was surrounded by a great team, and they won a Super Bowl because of it. So you look at Anthony Richardson, and that's a team that I would really like to see the Rams maybe trade up in the draft to get somebody like that, because Stafford's about to be over. But I feel like it's going to be a team who's going to see all this hype for Anthony Richardson and jump up early on, pick him in the top 10. He's not a top 10 worthy player unless you're a top 10 team like the Eagles, but they don't need a quarterback. The Philadelphia Eagles are picking, I think, number 6 this year, and they don't need anything. So there's really no team in the top 10 right now that could use a quarterback. The only other team that I could see there within the top 20 or so is the Dallas Cowboys, because they still don't know if they like Dak Prescott. That's another big thing. You've got the Ravens as well. If they don't want to, they could release Lamar Jackson right now, or just see if they could trade him in some capacity if they really want to take a chance, but it's just not worth it. And I think that goes for a lot of teams. I'm looking at any of these quarterbacks, unless you're talking about CJ Stroud. Of course, Bryce Young is going to be a day one starter for whoever drafts him, but we already know he's going to go to a horrible team. He's going to go to the Texans. He's going to go to the Titans. The Titans, I don't know what they were doing last year whenever they decided to draft Malik Willis and try and make him the guy, because coming out of Liberty, he looked like dog water. And then he came in the NFL, he couldn't even complete a pass. He showed nothing with his legs the entire season. He's not a good quarterback. And I think a lot of the quarterback prospects over the last 2 or 3 years have looked like this draft, in which they get super hyped up before the actual draft. And we kind of see who we thought was going to be the number one, like Trevor Lawrence last year, the year before last. It took him a year to get going because he had Urban Meyer, but you now see that he has the talent. And the only quarterback that I see right now that has the size and has the talent, because size is important in height in the NFL. You have to be tall at the quarterback position, is CJ Stroud. I mean, I don't think he's the perfect quarterback, but he's the only one right now that I can see being successful within his first 2 years and making a playoff game in any way, shape, or form, or at least getting his team out of the top 10 draft picks. So you look at Anthony Richardson, not going to play at all next season unless he's drafted in the top 10, which he may be getting hyped up right now by the NFL agents and the NFL scouts and everybody. You look at Will Levis, he's a guy that's going to be a starter in his first year, but he's going to be like Zach Wilson because he just doesn't look great. And then you look at a guy like Bryce Young, already referenced him. His height's not very good. You look at a guy like CJ Stroud, he's going to go to a horrible team, okay? But he's the best quarterback in the draft. And then me personally, I look at a guy like Hendon Hooker, who of course did get injured as the season went on, but for, I would say, 8 games, the first 8 games of the year, he was the Heisman candidate. He was the number 1 Heisman front runner until his injury. He's a good quarterback. He's played against good teams in the SEC. He beat Alabama in the biggest victory in Tennessee history since Peyton Manning was their quarterback. And you don't have to draft him in the first 2 or 3 rounds, it seems, because teams are sleeping on him because of his injury. And he's a guy that you're not going to start immediately either. He's a guy that you're going to bring in to compete, and he may just win the starting job because I've heard a lot of good things about him. Of course, he's a little bit older. He's almost Stetson Bennett's age, of course.
He is
23 or 24. He's 25. Yeah, he's 25 now. Him and Stetson Bennett are in the same boat. But right now, if you're a team that can't afford to draft a quarterback in the first round, you're going to end up with either Stetson Bennett or you're going to end up with a better quarterback like Hendon Hooker, who's more NFL ready than I believe Stetson Bennett is. But they're in the same boat, and I think either one of them could make a splash for a team with an injury at the quarterback position, because none of those guys are going to go to a team that really needs a quarterback unless it's in the very late rounds. Like Tampa Bay, maybe I could see maybe going after Hendon Hooker if he's still available in like the 3rd or 4th round, just to compete with Kyle Trask if you don't want to sign a free agent quarterback. But other than that, I mean, those 2 guys, Stetson Bennett and Hendon Hooker, at least Hendon Hooker, are going to probably be in the best situation out of all these quarterbacks, unless Anthony Richardson falls to where he should in the draft late in the first round. Because if he falls late in the first round to a good team, he could be a guy like Josh Allen. But if he ends up at the top of the draft, like we've seen all these great quarterbacks end up number 1, they never go anywhere. I mean, you remember Marcus Mariota, he needed progression. He didn't get it in Tennessee. He made the playoffs. So you look at Jameis Winston, he never got his progression until his final year in Tampa, in which he still threw 30 interceptions. So I think for a great quarterback, it sucks to be the best quarterback in the draft. It's always better to be one of the 2nd or 3rd best, because you're going to go to a better situation. And that really matters. Coaching matters coming out of college, because if you're not a guy that's playing in the SEC every day, you're not even close to NFL ready. Not even close. And that's the thing that I always look out for. And if I'm a team that needs a quarterback, I'm looking at the SEC. And the only other exception is CJ Stroud.
Well, you just referenced a few minutes ago Anthony Richardson and his performance against Will Levis and the Kentucky Wildcats. Richardson was off in that game. He went 14 of 35 through the air, 143 yards, so he averaged 10 yards per completion, had 2 interceptions, including a pick 6. And at the time, Florida
to end the game.
Florida was number 12 at the time, and Kentucky was number 20. And it was in the swamp. It was in Gainesville, and he did that. And he had 22 scouts, 22 NFL scouts, 15 NFL teams were there to see that. So I don't know if they're brainwashed by all this combine talk. And again, he's putting up some freakish numbers. He's a freak athlete, but is he NFL ready by any means? No. Again, this has to be a team that feels that they have a starter that can hold them over for a year and that they trust can, help hold the team afloat while he's still getting groomed as the backup quarterback. That is the best case scenario for Anthony Richardson and for his sake, really, because he doesn't want to go into a situation where he is the guy and then he shows what he's made of. The proof is in the pudding. He's one of the most inconsistent college quarterbacks. He finished the year with 17 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions, a QBR of 71.2 last year as a senior or as a sophomore at Florida. He's just not ready yet. So this does have to be like a team, you said, Spence, that can have him sit on the bench for a year and, become a groomed quarterback and go from there. But what teams are in that situation inside the top 10 that could use a backup quarterback to sit there? And as you said, the Rams would be a perfect fit, but I don't think they're in the top 10. I don't think they have that first round pick because they traded out of those picks in order to have a shot to win the ring. And they did that, last year. So,
yeah. And what I think we're going to see with Anthony Richardson is we're going to see Mel Kiper be like, all right, he's fallen in the draft. We're at pick number 4 or 5. They're like, because coming into the draft come April, if the hype continues how it is, He's a projected top 5 pick. It comes to pick 5. The team that's picking number 5 doesn't need a quarterback. It's the Seattle Seahawks. They also have the number 20th pick. I see a team trading a first-round pick this year and a first-round pick the next year and making a huge splash for him just because of all the hype surrounding him. And it's got to be a team that doesn't need a quarterback yet. So it's got to be a future move. And it's going to be difficult for any of the teams because you look at every single team and there's not really a good team right now that has a veteran quarterback that's going to start next year, that's going to retire in the next 2 or 3 seasons, because we thought the Packers were going to be that way with Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers goes on and wins 2 back-to-back MVPs, and Jordan Love's just sitting there. Love may get the opportunity next year once we figure out what Aaron Rodgers is going to do after his darkness retreat. But there's really that just doesn't seem to happen often, except for the case with the Buffalo Bills, in which Anthony Richardson reminds me a lot of Josh Allen coming out of college. And I think if he goes to a good team, he's going to be a good quarterback. If he doesn't go to a good team, the writing is on the wall. He's going to suck like he did in college because he was the star coming into this year. All I saw about college football, I don't watch that much college football, but all I saw was Gator fans hyping up Anthony Richardson. They were starting near the top 10 last year, and they ended horribly. They were awful. They, in their bowl game, they had to kick a field goal to lose that game 38-3 to make the longest non-shutout streak of all time with Pat McAfee on the call. So you see what you have with Anthony Richardson already. He's just got to go to a team where if he can't put together numbers in college football, he has absolutely no shot against going against people that are 5 to 10 years older than him, stronger than him, faster than him. I don't care that he ran a 4.4 at the combine. They're going to be faster than him, chasing him down, and he's not going to know where to go with the football, and he's going to end a season like Jameis Winston did with 30 interceptions without the 30 touchdowns because he's not ready for the NFL yet.
Yeah, and a team I just thought of, now they're not inside the top 10, they're not inside the top 15, they're not inside the top 20, they're on the outside looking in of the top 20. The Minnesota Vikings pick 23.
Yes, that's a good one.
That could be a realistic.
But they also very much so need defense. Their secondary was 30th in the league last year, so it's going to be. It's just, the thing. It just looks like a year where we're going to see him go to a team that cannot afford to build this guy up. Like, it's just not going to happen, and we're going to see most likely a failed career out of this guy because he's going to go to a team because the draft hype got too much. He's going to be like Zach Wilson in 2021, and he's going to end up in the top 5 or top 10, and he's going to suck and be nowhere in 2 or 3 years because Zach Wilson, if they sign Aaron Rodgers, is gone. He was getting benched for Mike White twice this season. That dude's done, and that dude has the same amount of hype that Anthony Richardson and Will Levis had just 2 years ago this was.
Now, other quarterbacks in this draft class and what they did at the combine, Bryce Young of Alabama, he officially had his height stamped at 5'10" and 1/8, 204 pounds. How much of a concern, if any, is that for you regarding an NFL quarterback? And this is a guy that played in the SEC for arguably one of the best college coaches, if not the greatest college football coach of all time, Nick Saban, a guy who's had so much success with the Alabama Crimson Tide over the last, 15 years or some change. And obviously, he's another quarterback in that system, but he's officially listed at 5'10", 1/8, 204 pounds. I can only imagine how many bottles of water he drank heading into that weigh-in. He's probably more like 195. But
Yeah.
How much of a concern, if any, is this for you? Because you look at his comparison, and he is the same height as Kyler Murray, and we know what Kyler Murray's made of. He's shorter than Russell Wilson. He is shorter than Drew Brees. I don't know. And those guys are already, like, when you think of short quarterbacks over the last decade, 2 decades, those are the guys that come to mind. Then you see Bryce Young, who's even shorter than those guys.
Yeah, I feel like a hypocrite whenever I say that Stetson Bennett could be a good backup quarterback somewhere later on and maybe even start at this season if he goes to a team that has a good quarterback that goes down. And then I go over here and say that Bryce Young cannot play in the NFL because he's just 1 inch shorter than Stetson Bennett. But I look at Kyler Murray, and the only time that I see him do anything great is whenever he's throwing deep down the field when he has time, or if he's running around for his life. And what I see with Bryce Young is he doesn't have the same athletic ability as Kyler Murray. He may have a good arm, but it's going to be tough for him in the NFL, especially whenever he goes to a team like the Houston Texans or whoever doesn't pick CJ Stroud first. I mean, whichever team he goes to, he's not going to have a good offensive line. He may have a decent receiving core, but he's going to get absolutely roughed up. And if he doesn't get up to 220 pounds before the season starts, he's screwed. And being 5'10" in the NFL, and you look at your offensive linemen, and every offensive lineman in the NFL besides AQ Shipley is at least 6'3" and up, including your tackles being 6'6", 6'7".
Good luck, Charlie.
What are you gonna see over? Especially whenever you look at a defensive tackle who's standing up, arms all the way in the air, jumping up on every single play because they know that you don't have the greatest athletic ability to run. Of course, he is an athlete. He can scramble a little bit, but I mean, he's not going to be able to get the ball over the defensive tackle, or he may even hit his offensive lineman in the back of the head, like Kyler Murray has done in his career, and he's been ridiculed for it. And you see all the memes about Kyler Murray being so short. They shrink him down in Madden to make him look like an absolute midget. And Bryce Young is the exact same height. So I want to see the exact same thing that people say about Kyler Murray to Bryce Young heading into the draft. I think we're seeing that a little bit now. But if you're going to treat Kyler Murray like he's been treated, I think Bryce Young has to get the same treatment because they're the same height. And in the commercial, in the Heisman commercial, I swear to God, Kyler Murray is taller than Bryce Young in that commercial, which is absolutely just not a good look for Bryce Young heading into the draft. But regardless of how we feel, he is a top 5 pick. We'll see how he does in the NFL, but not seeing over the line is, of course, going to be a struggle. And if he's not like Drew Brees getting the ball out every 4 seconds, because Drew Brees also is not 6 foot, he was just put that in 2005 before they really cared about that. Because Doug Flutie was a quarterback back then. But if he's not getting the ball out quickly in the NFL with this horrible offensive line that he is going to inherit regardless of where he goes to, he's screwed. So we'll see exactly how he does. I mean, we saw the same thing with Tua, and Tua's 6 foot, maybe 6'1", and he looks so small on the field. So I can't imagine what another Kyler Murray lookalike will look like on the field. And I guarantee you this guy weighs less than Kyler Murray as well, because Kyler Murray may be 5'10", but he's stout. He's a stout quarterback.
Yeah, he is stout.
And I just don't see the same thing out of Bryce Young. I see a long neck, very skinny. And I mean, if he gets hit hard enough, which I can't, I get that he played in the SEC. He got absolutely pummeled probably in some of the big games, but the NFL is a very different beast that he's going to have to go against. Yeah. And he's going to be not on a team of Alabama's level. Of course, Alabama didn't have a good offensive line or receiving core this year, but whoever he goes to in the NFL is going to be much worse playing against better talent. So he is going to have a very tough transition to the NFL. And I think that height does matter. And that's why we may even see Anthony Richardson, if the height continues, get drafted before Bryce Young. And we see him fall like we saw Lamar Jackson did in 2018.
Got an update from another quarterback. Speaking of all these great quarterbacks, we personally know a great quarterback by the name of Joseph Mancuso. Got an update from him on Saturday, gave him a ring. He missed my call, called me back about 20 minutes later for good reason. I'll get into that here in just a moment because it is pretty exciting news there regarding Joe Mancuso. But Spence, at the end of the day, would you rather, let's say, take Stetson Bennett 4th or 5th round, no matter what team you are, if you're a team that, because again, unfortunately, I do think that Anthony Richardson goes top 10, even though he should not. I think a team's just going to take a shot on him. Would you rather take a shot on Anthony Richardson top 10 with his ceiling? Because he arguably, as an athlete, has the highest ceiling, right? If all goes perfect, he has the highest ceiling.
And he calls himself Cam Jackson, apparently, is what he told Combine reporters. He said he's a mix between Cam Newton and Lamar Jackson. He's been calling himself that since 11th grade.
I don't like that, considering the fact that Lamar Jackson misses a lot of playing time and Cam Newton.
Considering the fact that Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton are 2 of the greatest college quarterbacks of all time, and he's coming into the draft as a top 10 projected pick, throwing more interceptions than touchdowns in most of his games this season. It's a tough look, but we'll see.
So would you rather take a shot on Stetson Bennett or Anthony Richardson with their expected draft pick, knowing where they're expected to fall? What would you feel more comfortable with and why?
Honestly, if you're looking at it as a fact that you may need a quarterback, you're going to want Anthony Richardson. I think that's probably I get that you're going to get Stetson Bennett in the late rounds, but Anthony Richardson being 4 years younger than Stetson Bennett is a big play into that. But I mean, if I'm a team with a good quarterback already and I'm not looking to replace this quarterback in some time, and you don't want to spend the money on a free agent backup quarterback, I think Stetson Bennett's the guy. But if you're a team that needs a quarterback in the near future, and you think maybe a year, or you got to say a year, you can't have the starter in the building for 2 more years if you want to produce something, because they have to start in their second season. You say Josh Allen played in his first season after Tyrod Taylor got his lung punctured. You also saw Patrick Mahomes played a little bit in his first season, didn't get the start till year 2, but it cannot be a Jordan Love type situation where he's a backup for 3 years and we may never see him actually be a good quarterback. I mean, of course, he's been marinating for 3 years, but that doesn't mean he's learned shit from Aaron Rodgers. And honestly, I'm picking Anthony Richardson if I'm a team that doesn't need a quarterback right now. But if I'm a team that needs a quarterback and I don't want to go in the early rounds and I just want to like get some hype for my squad, it's kind of like drafting Tim Tebow with Stetson Bennett right now.
Yeah.
2-time national champion, back-to-back years, a very, let's just say a very dependable quarterback, okay? He can run as well, which is a very big bonus to have as a backup quarterback, but he's not an NFL caliber starter either. Neither is Anthony Richardson right now, but Richardson will develop into that. So
that's true.
So if I'm a team that needs a quarterback, I'm drafting Stetson Bennett late if I don't want to spend very early on any of these boomer bust prospects because he may have an opportunity to play. You're going to put him against a free agent quarterback during the training camp, and he's probably not going to win, but you're not going to risk that much with him over Anthony Richardson, which the only time you should draft Anthony Richardson right now is if you're a team that is going to need a quarterback next season, not this year, next season. And there's not a lot of teams but like that besides the Tennessee Titans because Tannehill, I think, is done. Malik Willis sucks, and if they don't sign Aaron Rodgers, they're shit out of luck. The New York Jets could be a potential team if they want to sign a free agent quarterback if they don't get Aaron Rodgers. And those are the only two. The Rams I was looking at, but they don't have a first-round pick, and they can't afford to continue trading up into the draft. And Richardson's not going to be there in the second round. So most likely it's going to be a team like the Texans or a team in the top 10 that sucks, and a quarterback is not what they need.
Yeah, I think a team's going to do that, and I think that they're going to either think, you know what, I don't know what we were thinking. We bought into all the hype. We got screwed. This was a big bust. Or maybe 3 to 5 years from now, they say, hey, you know what? How about all those doubters that thought that we were crazy and that we bought into the hype for no reason? So there is that flip of the coin in regards to that quarterback. Again, Stetson Bennett, I think realistically is a early 4th-round pick at best. I think that he would be, he's a winner, number one. I know he had a great roster there with Georgia, great head coaching staff too, but he's been a warrior. I mean, he's battled for his opportunity year in and year out.
Yeah, I'm looking. Okay, so this could play into the hype for Anthony Richardson right now because I'm looking at his final 5 games in college, okay? He played UGA. They got pummeled. He ended that game with 271 yards passing, no interceptions. In his final 5 college games, he didn't throw an interception. He didn't throw more than 1 interception in a game. In his last 2 games against Vanderbilt and Florida State University, they lost both of those games, but he put up 400 yards against Vanderbilt, 200 yards against Florida State, but 3 touchdowns and 1 interception in each of those games with a pretty good QBR. And he also beat South Carolina 38-6. They beat Texas A&M 41-24. He played decent against the best team in Georgia. So, I mean, that could, of course, go into it. That's something that I haven't really looked at. I mean, I just remember watching him in the early part of the season. He was absolute dog water. And I guess now that I remember, he did not play in that bowl game that they lost 38-3 because of the draft. So maybe that could play a part into it, but I still stand by the fact that he's not going to be a starter day 1 next season if you want this guy to succeed.
Yeah, and it's going to be one of those situations where GM has to be willing to sit there and groom this guy and hope that you have a great quarterback coach, hope that you have a great veteran on the bench alongside this guy to help groom him. But other quarterback news regarding a guy that we know, Joe Mancuso. He's officially playing in the IFL Indoor Football League with Las Vegas, the Nighthawks. So that starts up. He's going to training camp this week. I know, yeah, he's going to training camp this week. And where he's reporting this week, training camp is, I forget the exact dates. But either way, he told me, and he's excited for the opportunity. He's moving his family out to Las Vegas to make this happen. And I think last year they had 20 or 22 guys go to other leagues. So whether that be XFL, maybe even the NFL, bigger leagues in the IFL. So Joe Mancuso continuing to play his football career, continuing to chase out that dream after an incredible career there at Richmond, went off to the CFL, had a little stint there, didn't work out as he'd like. So I called him Saturday, caught up with him. He missed my call the first time, called me back and said, hey, man, I was throwing the football. I said, hey, if that's what you're doing, you miss my call every time, man. You keep grinding. And he's like, yeah. So I said, what's the latest? And he's like, I'm in the IFL. I officially head out this upcoming week. So Joe Mancuso, I'm excited for him. Went to school with him. We also did a talk to him Tuesday, 2 of those with Joe, and they were both fantastic. So Joe's 24, 25 years old. He's still got a shot. He's the same age as some of these rookies.
Colts should have kept him.
Yeah, Colts should have kept him for sure. No doubt about it. He would have had a chance. He would have had somewhat of a chance this year, no doubt, legitimately. And he was there. He went to he had a tryout with the Indianapolis Colts last offseason. So this guy's going to work hard. We know what he's all about. We know his football knowledge. Now, with this field in the IFL, it's 50 yards long. It's half the distance of an NFL field. And I think it's 22 or 27 yards wide. So he told me he's going to have to make some really smart throws, be really quick with the football. He has 3 offensive linemen, a total of 8 players on both sides of the ball. So it's going to be exciting. I'm excited for Joe Mancuso.
Is there no running back?
There is a running back. There's one less receiver, or there's no running back and one more receiver. It depends on how you want to play. He said that it's easier to read defenses, he feels like, because there's less room for them to do crazy covers or, trying to show blitz or disguise this or disguise man coverage, disguise his own. But I'm excited for him. I'm excited for Joe Mancuso, and we'll keep you guys posted on how that goes. But as far as this edition of TCM Pod, I think that's it, Spence, unless you have any more quarterback talk that you want to throw in there, because we had a lot to get into today regarding, of course, the passing of the great Dave Wills, the voice of the Tampa Bay Rays. Passed away at 58 years old on Saturday night. I believe the news became official on Sunday.
Yeah, let's talk about the off-the-field lives of Michael Vick, Ben Roethlisberger, and Deshaun Watson right now.
What?
No, we won't do that.
Oh, okay. I didn't know where you're going with that. It took me a second to realize the trio. But again, TCM Pod. I didn't know if you were referencing what one of the quarterbacks entering the draft compared himself to.
Oh, yeah. I
thought you were going to get into that.
He said Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson.
That's right.
Was that Anthony Richardson, or was that CJ Stroud? I'll continue to talk about their let's add. I mean, now that Jameis Winston's gone, we could add Jameis Winston to the situation. He had some stuff as well. A couple other. We got Brett Favre. If you want to go out of the realm of those 4 quarterbacks, of course. I mean, he scammed an entire state, which was pretty interesting, and then tried to sue Pat McAfee in return for slander. So let's talk about Brett Favre right now. As Chris tries to pull this up, Brett Favre kind of took away welfare money from an entire state and has basically gotten away with the whole thing, not in prison somehow. He funded his daughter's volleyball program at the high school she goes to build a new arena with welfare money from the state that he was in. I can't remember. I think it was Kentucky. So very interesting choice for Brett Favre, a great quarterback. We knew he was a Looney Tune already coming out of the league. He was addicted to painkillers in the year that he tied MVP voting. He was the co-MVP with Marshall Faulk. So we kind of knew he would probably do something like this. We kind of knew maybe he would turn into a Kanye-type situation. And that's what we've seen out of him since he has retired. I mean, the Wrangler jeans, he's far from that life now. He's far from unretiring and retiring over and over again, kind of like Tom Brady did. Of course, I don't think Tom Brady's going to steal anybody's welfare checks or anything, so that'll be a good thing moving forward. I think Tom Brady's just going to steal money from the NFL broadcast booths, and Greg Olsen, of course, who deserves money, but Tom Brady will be one of the greatest broadcasters of all time, hopefully, if he puts in as much time he puts in to the NFL. But the big 4 today that we're going to be talking about, Big Ben, Deshaun Watson,
I can't find
Michael Vick, and Brett Favre, as Chris continues to not find it.
CJ Stroud, Cam Newton, and Michael Vick. Yes, that's right. Yep, Cam Newton and Michael Vick. So either way, interesting headline there. I thought that was something of to note, or something worth noting to chew on. But again, another edition of the Chris Mathis podcast at TCM_pod. And do us a favor, go leave us a review on YouTube, leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcast too. 5 stars. Leave that review. We would appreciate it. And always grateful for you guys. So thank you for making this possible. Thank you for information on demand. 855-914-4636. Spence has something else to add.
This will be the final thing we say. I hope you enjoyed my filibuster. Trying to fill the time is what you call it.
That was great.
In the court of law, if you want to delay the passing of a law or a bill, Chris, and you are in the legislation, you can go up there in the gigantic Supreme Court, okay? The big thing that's very important in our government, okay? And you can read bedtime stories for 48 hours up until the passing of that bill was supposed to be passed, because they have to give you the floor. So you could spend days on days on days if you really don't want a bill to be passed. And we see that a lot within our government. And I just wanted to show you guys here on the podcast that we can do that also on the Sports Talk Radio. And I just want you to continue to know that as you go on with your daily lives, that the national government, we don't know too much about. So we're going to end it here for the Chris Mathis podcast. I'm Spencer Mathis. That is the host over there on your left, or at least my left. Not sure how it's going to look on your computer or phone screen, but that's going to do it for
left to right.
This edition. We hope you have a great week of March 6th through the 11th. I hope you have a great time on your Monday through Friday travels and into the weekend next week. Guess what?